Welcome to the BXG Podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet.
You think it's just going to be barbecue sauce?
Because if you actually read those books, it's just gobbledygook.
I really think clothes should be mandatory.
Speaking of Star Wars,
Captain America.
trailer reaction video. But I suppose we should begin with Andor.
Let's do it.
And the scene was set. He's returning to Firrex for his mother's funeral march, and kind of everybody else is also making their way down to Firrex. It seems to be this is sort of like, the powder keg situation. We have the Imperial supervisor Deidre Miro and her crew. Cyril Karn is on his way. Luthen is on his way to, he's going to kill Cassian because he knows too much, whatever. And some other characters kind of interspersed as well. And the main thing is that the kind of two big plot points here is that there's a hologram reading pre-prepared by his mother, who is, the person in question, Marva Andor, who's passed away. And she basically calls on all the people to fight the Empire. And so that kind of erupts into a big riot. The kid whose dad was tortured to basically to the point of insanity, I think they were going to hang him in the one episode, makes like a pretty decent looking pipe bomb that he creates some havoc with. And all the while this is taking place, Cassian is, fixed on saving Bix and getting her out on the ship, and then kind of going back to find Luthen. And so, it turns into like a big riot, and you can kind of, make the case that this is like the spark of the rebellion and that sort of thing. But overall, somewhat action-packed episode, leaves us sort of with a clear trajectory into the second season. There's some other, different character developments that we can talk about. But before we talk about the season as a whole, what did you think about just this final episode?
I thought the final episode was good, not great. It it probably wasn't as action-packed as I was hoping, considering what we were leading into. It also felt like a season finale where they really weren't sure if they were going to get a second season. And so they're just like, okay, so he's off doing his thing. And maybe the next thing is we are going to, Rogue One kind of thing. Or, there's still going to be a storyline happening. We don't really know, but we know what he's getting into. Or we are going to have a season 2 and he'll be up to more antics. And, antics not probably the right word, but it's just he'll be up to more stuff to get us through the rebellion. Because we do, when we have the hologram and everyone freaks out about that, it is like that sort of uproar to this. I did think there was just a lot of little parts that mattered, but just didn't really push the story along as much as I would have liked. Like up until we got the hologram, there wasn't a lot of anything that was truly, truly happening. And then we get the hologram and that starts getting the ball rolling. So I think that was maybe I think that was one of those things where like, we need to still make this an episode of like 35 minutes, but we'd also only have about 28 minutes worth of real content.
I think it ended up being closer to 45 with
I guess it was probably about 45. Yeah. And so it felt like, I would say there's felt like about 7 minutes of stuff where wouldn't say like nothing happens. It was just 7 minutes where it wasn't really needed. It didn't push the story along. So that was fine. I just think my issue with this was it wasn't as big as I necessarily wanted it to be. So I thought it was a little bit of a letdown as a season finale. But then again, it's also leading into a season 2. I think I'd be more let down if this was it than anything. So just minorly let down, but at least I know that the show itself as a whole, like we'll get into that, what we can expect. But based purely on this episode, it was a little bit of a letdown for me. Still good, but just not what I was actually hoping, which maybe is just more on me than the show itself.
I tend to disagree with you to an extent. The extent being that it was a letdown. I do kind of I agree with you that it wasn't necessarily as action filled as maybe you would have liked for a season finale. But I thought that the speech given by his mother in the hologram was so powerful, and it was just grade A writing, I think. And it goes back to sort of the struggle that I have with not the hate, but like not hate online for this show, but the just general indifference towards it, I feel like. Okay. And I struggle with that because people, we've talked about the ratings, whatever, they're not super great, or like viewership, whatever you want to call it with streaming. I don't know how you really even refer to that, but how people have not really been watching this. And it's just such a shame because there are moments, and I would point to two specifically, the speech that his mother gives in her, funeral march with the hologram, whatever. And then the speech that Luthen gives towards the end of one of the more recent episodes. I don't remember exactly, where he's talking about, finding the heroes whose names won't be remembered. I just think that the writing for this is outstanding. And
yes,
I think that, those particular monologues are the best thing that we've seen since the original trilogy. And I know that people get upset. Like, the thing that isn't a draw is like, well, there's no lightsabers, there's no Jedi, there's no Sith. You don't get, where is blah, blah, blah. I just think that that's really short-sighted, and that like people, I feel like the people who don't like this, that are Star Wars fans, are probably the same people who are just head over heels for Rey, which that can't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me, because I think that she's just a boring character. She's not at all, she has no weaknesses. She's not flawed. She's just not interesting. But those people are like, oh, she's a badass woman with a lightsaber. It's like, no, I mean, sure, whatever, but it's not compelling. And whereas this has been from tip to tail just very compelling. I thought this was a nice cap. I thought it was a good cap to show that people are starting to push back against the Empire. And I thought that this show did a good job, and we can get into it when we talk about the season, but I think that it was very well displayed in this episode, just how diabolical their methods can be, because Bix is done. Like, she's done.
Yeah.
Her brain is just completely scrambled eggs at this point. And you wonder if there's any coming back for that. And I thought it was funny. I saw something that said like, oh, Bix should get her own series. It's like, no, we don't need a series for everybody, number one. And number two is, how are you going to have, like, what's that series going to be? She just is on screen going dribbling oatmeal down her shirt for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So I thought that was well conveyed, though. The trauma, the effects of that torture method on her showed that she's just not there anymore. And I thought the end cap, where he says either kill me or take me in, and it's like, that's okay. This is where the real road to Rogue One kind of starts. But I think there's still plenty of stories to be told, because by the time we get to Rogue One, this dude is like grizzly. He's like a grizzled veteran of the rebellion, and he's the gray area. He shows the gray area, and that's why I think that he and this cast of characters in general is so interesting. They alluded to the Krieger character being basically massacred out in space, and Luthen set that guy up. He said, well, we can either sacrifice these guys or keep our inside man, which is more important. And that's not the type of stuff really that George Lucas was going to have a conversation about in any of these movies. Whereas his stuff is very good versus evil, very cut and dry. This has done a great job of showing the gray area. It is a more mature, I think, presentation of Star Wars. What did you think about the end credit scene when we find out what he was actually building in the prison colony?
I mean, that was pretty cool. It was one of those things too where I like, normally the end credit scene lets you just kind of pop up, and when it happened, I was like, oh, this must be something. Yeah. And so no, I thought that was cool. It was just one of those things where it like gave me that, when I was like saying overall, I was like, so I would say I was just disappointed. I was like, I was expecting like a 10 out of 10 episode, and I think I got like a 9. It's sort of that thing. That kind of gave me this like, oh, the show is still awesome. Like, yeah, we now know what's up, and you know, it definitely leaves you wanting more and excited about that second season.
Yeah. I would say the end credit scene, where I wanted to know the whole time what they were building. And I kept saying to myself, like, why does it just show what they're building? Why, like, are they building TIE? Like, why aren't they just building like TIE fighter wings or something? And then you actually see what it is. It's like, oh, okay. That makes it kind of cooler, that whole situation. But, so that's kind of a nice way to round out that final episode. The season as a whole, highs, lows, favorite characters, least favorite characters. Where do we go?
I think for the heist episode is definitely still my favorite of all the episodes. Just right into my wheelhouse. I mean, I like the jailbreak too. Those were probably my first 2, but the heist was definitely my favorite. I mean, my least favorite episode, I don't really know if there's like a least. It was just every other episode after like the heist and the jailbreak were all just equally, I feel like, good. I mean, not like up to that level, but it was, I'm trying to just, there's nothing, to me, there wasn't like necessarily a bad episode. I'm trying to even think back if we even said anything was ever going to be bad. I think I just taken the easy way out, but like Andor was probably my favorite character, just because I liked that we actually got more of a storyline behind him. And yes, there's other interesting characters, but it was cool that I like where a show is about him, but it wasn't necessarily all about him either. And so when he was on the screen, it felt special, and I think I like that part of it too. Least favorite, least favorite character. I don't know. I don't know if I really have a least favorite character. This is some of those things where like, I sent you the story and you talked about where like relatively no one's watching the show, and it bums me out because it is so good. And like, if you're talking about any of the other Star Wars material we've got in the last, 20 years, 23 years, I guess, it'd be easy to pick like all these things. Because there's like your favorite, your least favorite, a part that sucked, a part that was great. Like that's all easy. But I think this was so steady and so well done that for me, it's really hard. I feel like I was never that disappointed with anything happening. And I was always like, this is good. Like, it's just so nice to walk away, because we were both like excited about this, but I think expectations wise, it exceeded mine by a lot, actually.
It definitely exceeded my expectations. I had a hunch that this was going to be good, but I didn't realize just how good I was going to find it. I think that, so least favorite character, I don't really,
Yeah.
There's not really one to really point at. Maybe like some of the Imperial, like the other Imperial supervisor, the black guy who's just like oddly a prick. Like I
Right.
don't really
Yeah.
understand why he was the way he was, but it didn't really detract from the story. I don't think that like that's the thing, that I don't think that there was any characters that detracted from the story. There wasn't any characters
No.
where it was like, okay, we can kind of poke fun at this character. And I think that there have been characters like that through every other Star Wars TV series to date, including The Mandalorian. There's some different characters that you could kind of poke at where it's like, oh God, the Horatio Sands character in both season 1 and season 2 was like, okay, this guy, he's like so over the top. And there's others, and poor episodes and all those sorts of things. But I don't think that there's a weak link in this series
No.
as far as a character or really an episode. I think maybe the episode, there was I want to say there was 2 build-up episodes before the heist actually took place. And I feel like maybe they could have truncated that down to 1, but it wasn't like either of those episodes were bad. It was just that it was almost an excessive amount of buildup. Favorite episodes, I think the Prison Break episode was my favorite because it gave us 2 really powerful moments. And it also goes hand in hand with my 2 favorite characters of the series. Number 1, Luthen, and number 2, Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis. That episode gave you the speech that I alluded to earlier with Luthen, where he said, I'm looking for the heroes who won't be remembered. I just think that that's really powerful in the scope of whether it be Star Wars or any story, any conflict like this, where you're struggling against like a greater evil or whatever. Kino Loy in that episode led the Prison Break, led everyone to their independence, knowing the whole time that he wasn't going to get his because he can't swim. And that was another one of those moments where I felt like, I love Andy Serkis. So like to see that character go from kind of being the manager of the floor, kind of a hard ass, maybe a little bit of a douchebag, to, okay, I understand what's happening here, and we have to stand up to these guys. It was just really cool. And I think that those are moments that we didn't get moments like that in Boba Fett. Certainly we don't have as many of those moments that are really that powerful. We have really cool moments in The Mandalorian. They're really cool Star Wars moments, but there's not like those powerful moments in the same way. And I think that that's what this show had more than anything. Obi-Wan to me is almost like its own thing. It's like, okay, it was fine. We liked it, but it's just kind of like out there on its own doing whatever. Yeah, I just thought that, this show was really well written, really wonderfully paced, focus on practical effects as much as they could. We talked in the one episode how they weren't using the giant kind of green screen. I forget what it's called, that has been used on several of the other shows. No Tatooine in this series, which was a big relief. But yeah, overall, I mean, what would you give the series, season 1?
Season 1, I would say 8.5.
8.5?
Yeah, 8.5.
I think I would say.
Which I think it's like.
I think I would say 9.5.
Oh wow, nice. I mean, like it has nothing to do. It's just it's so hard to get into that 9 for something for me on a show. But I think honestly, like I would say it's probably closer to 9 than an 8.5. But we just do the point, fives. Sure. But I just can't give it a 9 because I think when there were parts that just weren't up to my expectations, that's what dragged it down. Not that 8.5 is bad by any means. I mean, you take that any day over a lot of the other stuff that we've watched. We don't really hand out things that high unless it's like, honestly, like the Weird Al movie. We both really gave high scores, and stuff like that.
The
you
Batman.
know, the Batman, exactly. So I think for a TV show, especially a TV show that was so different, has Star Wars in the title, and that's kind of
Mhm.
it. I think I will say I will be hard pressed to find a TV show that we do on this show that I would give that high for a while, even going forward. I would.
I cannot think of anything that we have watched this year. And we watched some good stuff. I mean, we
Yeah.
watched We Own the City, Under the Banner of Heaven, some other things. I just don't think that I've seen anything that's quite in the same league as this. I know outcry, presumably from House of Dragons people, but this was better than House of the Dragon.
Oh yeah, it was definitely
And
better.
it was, and maybe that's people saying, oh, you're just a Star Wars fanboy, whatever. I really liked House of the Dragon. I really liked it. I thought it was excellent. This was better. This was,
Right.
it was more well written. It was more well paced. There wasn't any weird incestuous porno episodes. I just felt as though I just like this. I just liked it a lot more. And I'm very excited. This is the effect that this has had on me. I am more excited for the second season of Andor, which is currently in production, than I am the next season of The Mandalorian, which will be starting here in the next couple months.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah.
So there you have it. Andor.
Andor.
Check it out.
Very good.
2 thumbs way up.